All right, all right. I think we're live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing
Welcome, guys.
today. And yeah, that's Fabian talking on the side of me. You want to talk on me again? Say something?
I'll wait till you start
What?
talking.
Oh. All right. So today we have a special kind of bonus live Q&A. I'm going to talk about something very specific today because I want to help you guys. I saw a few of you had a little bit of difficulties going from black and white to colors, and end up with colors that are really, really dark. And although it could be a style, something that you personally like, which would be totally fine, I thought I would give you just the tool so you can make sure that doesn't happen to you if you don't want that. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to make sure that you can fix your values with your color illustration. And yeah, Fabian is going to be there. He's going to monitor the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them. Although we're going to take the first part of this 40-minute call, 45 minutes call together. The first part to just explain you deeply the topic of the subject of today. And after that, I'll be gladly open to hear all your questions and yeah, do some answering at that point. Fabian, did you want to say something? Did I forget something?
No, I think you covered that pretty well. Yeah, exactly. Like David said, you can just pop questions in the chat. If I think it's urgent or will help to ask at that point, I'll do it then. Otherwise, I'll just collect all the questions and we can go through them at the end. Yeah, I think that covers pretty much everything. So don't forget to switch yourself to presenter mode before sharing.
Yeah, see. Yeah, how do I do that again?
You just hover over your
presenter.
Like,
there you go.
There you go.
All right, cool. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, guys, and show you what I have prepared for you today. So today I'm going to work on the illustration of Chiron because it's a great example of the issues I'm trying to fix today. Beautiful artwork from Chiron today. And I took the black and white image and the colored image. To show you the difference of what happened. So basically what we're trying to do today is to fix the darkness of this illustration. Now I'm going to point out here that maybe for Chiron, this is a style that he wants. And if it's something that he wants, then you don't have to fix it. But if you feel like you're not able to bring colorful, vivid, saturated color, I'm going to show you how to fix it and what's the problem and how did it occur. So let's start with this black and white image first. So any image that you start that will have close to white or close to dark is going to be hard for you to put color on it from a black and white image. The reason is simple. More it's white or dark, more it's desaturated. It's hard to have saturated color from there. It's doable, but it's much easier when you have closer gray tones in it. So the first thing that Chiron would have to do before even coloring is make sure that his illustration is not so high contrast. Now, this is a very, very high contrast image. If you zoom out of it, you have very dark places and very bright places. And if you even zoom in out of it, it looks like there's like spots of whites everywhere and spots of darks everywhere. That's what we call in a high contrast value image, basically. So the first thing you should have done before putting in color is making sure that you have well-rendered values. Now, I'm going to show you here a trick in Photoshop how to fix that very, very quickly. Instead of having to paint the values, I'm just going to fix them. I'm going to use a level adjustment layer for that. And what I'll do is I'm going to bring down the dark, so bring down the black to a gray zone. And I'm going to do the same thing with the white. So it's going to bring everything closer to a gray kind of thing. Now, this is too gray. It's missing the high contrast that we just add. That now it's absolutely gone. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on that layer, on that level that I just put. It's going to open this panel here. And on this panel, I'll be able to just bring back some of the black with the right proper transition. And I'm going to do the same thing with the white. So I'm going to bring back a little bit of the whites. And this is a more complete image. So what I did basically, if I flick in and out, you see is I made sure to bring back grays, a little bit more rounded, basically. Now, usually you do that while painting. In this case, I'm using an adjustment layer to fix it. And then I would probably go back and try to fix and paint. But you can see that even that is making a pretty good job, making sure that it's not so high contrast anymore. I have some high contrast at certain places, but it's a lot more well-rounded. And putting color on this image is going to be much easier to do it here. Now, that's the fix for the black and white, but I'm guessing that most of you, depending where you are on illustration, you already put your colors in. So I want to show you really today how to fix a too dark image. So this is the image where Tyron is at this point. Like I said, it's beautiful. It's high contrast. There's colors, so it's great, but it's missing a lot of details right now that Tyron took the time to paint, but we're missing. It's not there because it's too dark. Now, that could be also because of my screen. Depending on the screen that you're working and the screen that people are working, an image can go from dark to too dark or dark to too pale, depending on just the setting of your screen. So there's always a little bit of that. But it's important to just make sure that your screen is adjusted as much as possible. And B, to make sure that you're not going too dark. If you're going too dark in your colors, when you're going to print it, you're going to lose a lot of details on it. Like I'm losing all the details that I have in the hair here. And I want to show you how much I miss by putting just a level here and boosting the contrast here. And then I'm going to zoom in to show you all that details that's right here. I'm missing here. It's all just dark now. It's just a patch of dark. I'm missing all that beautiful rendering and time and effort that Tyron put in it. And I think that's a shame. So we're going to try to fix that today by using a few adjustment layers to show you how I can do it from this image. If you're not in Photoshop, the other adjustment layers that you have in your application software could work as well. But at the end of the day, I'm showing you shortcuts here, but really what's missing here is just to fix the black and white image like we saw at the beginning. That would have been the first fix you have to do, and that you have to paint by hand. So today I'm going to give you the quick fix on how to do this and what's the difference. I'm going to show you the difference between the two of them. So you have a visual, visual repair that you know where you're supposed to go. Now I'm going to put precise again one last time that maybe the black and white high contrast is a style that Tyron wants to have. And if it's the case, then it's no problem. I just want to give you guys the opportunity to have the control over what you want. So without any further ado, the first thing I want to do here is obviously making sure that I change my black. There's a lot of black here, and the black has no color. I want to put a color to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a curve adjustment layer. What I like about curve layer is I'm able to just take one of the three channel, the red, the green, and the blue. I can take just one, and I'm going to boost it a little bit. And you can see now, I'm going to boost it too much so you can see, but you see it's going to put some colors and everything. It's going to put colors on the black as well. And because the dress is red, and it's mostly that I want to bring back a little bit, I'm going to do this for the red. I'm going to boost it up just a bit more, bring back some values. So we went from very dark to a little bit more red. Now it's on everything. In Photoshop, what's great about this is I'm able to have a little bit more control by double clicking on that adjustment layer, going back to my blend if, put that is here on the side. I'll be able again to just make sure that I don't put it on everything. So I'm just going to separate it here. And it's just going to bring a little bit more. So I went from too dark now to this. I kept the dark parts. Now, on that mask from that same layer, I'm just going to make sure that the background is a little bit separated. So I'm just going to paint here and just bring back the darkness in the background. Because really, I want just more like the red and her to be adjusted. I'm going to paint over all this here. And so I adjusted mainly the character here, bring it back here. And I'll make sure to go over her head also to just bring back also in the hair, maybe also in the face a little bit. Just make sure I got that. All right, so that was pretty much my first step. So I already bring back some colors and some values now. The character is a lot more saturated, which is great. Now, it's important also to make sure that if you do that technique to bring back the occlusion shadows. So I'll make sure to just go back and see where I can just amplify the occlusion shadow with some pure black, because it's always important to have that contrast. You just don't want it as much everywhere. So I'm just going to I'm painting with black now. And I'm painting that occlusion shadow that I'm supposed to have in corners. I would have to do this pretty much everywhere. Now I'm just going to paint just under here a little bit, bringing that darkness. I obviously colored the legs while doing this, and now the skin tone from here to here is different. I'm going to keep it as is for now, but you would have probably to just paint on the mask and bring back those legs if you wanted the same skin tone. You know what? Maybe I'll just do that real quick for you guys. So I'm just going to bring back the skin tone. The cool thing when you put an adjustment layer, you can really have with a mask the control over every part. So right now you see I've been doing it on the dress, and I'm keeping the legs. But even the legs I could try to fix also later. This is really dark. So that's one thing. I could, now that it's done, I'm going to take a new adjustment layer. This one I'm going to take the vibrance. Vibrance is going to add a little bit more saturation. By adding vibrance, it's going to add saturation. By obviously adding saturation, is going to saturate things as well. So that's an adjustment layer that will bring more colors to the whole illustration. Now, I could also decide that that black in the background could be a different color. So what I could do is have another layer of levels. This one I'm going to boost the blue. Whoops, not levels, sorry, curves. Another level of curves. And I am going to boost the blue just for the background. So now I have a little bit more saturation and a color. I don't want it to touch really the character here. So I'm going to go on my mask and paint over my dress right over here. So you see, even though my illustration was already like painted, I'm able to just go take one bit by bit and just adjust each color separately. Okay. So there's still a few, I'm going to take a new layer here. There's still a few occlusion shadows that we need to be like boost, thinking like here. For the shadows right here as well. So I'm painting with black here to just bring back. So you have to make sure that you think about where the occlusion shadows are supposed to be and everything. Same thing in the background now. Like I could have some deeper dark occlusion shadows at some places, like in the mouth here, maybe. Just trying to paint to keep that contrast still intense. So now I have those two things. It's a little bit more boost up, as you can see now. I feel like the skin tone of the face and the legs are still different, but I think that's part of the original illustration that we have. I'm going to put that all together. There was already a lot of difference, so I'm just going to keep it as is for now. From here, the other thing that was a problem when he started is because it was so high contrast and the white is desaturated from the beginning, and the dark is desaturated from the beginning. Now we fixed it. I don't need that. We fixed it, the saturation of the dress with what we did already, so it's already more saturated. But the highlights, very, very bright highlights here. One thing you can do is use a multiply layer, and because I want to make sure that there's a difference between this fabric and this fabric, I'm going to paint with a very pale yet saturated red on top of it. And you see it's going to keep the highlights. There's still a difference between the dark part and the light part, but now the whole dress is colored. It's not desaturated like it was with the white. It's colored, but I can still see the highlights. And if I wanted to push that a little bit more, I could either do the blend if, that section here when you double click on your layer, and try to just bring back some of the white. But I feel like because it's all flat almost as a color, I think the best way would be to actually paint it manually and then just decide maybe there's a few highlights that you can paint manually. That would be optional, I think, because I think the highlights are already showing a lot already. To just push them a little bit more. That would be how I would personally do it. Just manually finding the places that you want them and then paint them. So it's already a lot more colored together. Obviously, there's a huge difference into the color between the background now. I feel and the dress, like I would probably try to bring a little bit of the red into the hair of my characters on the sides. That's something that you can do by just painting on the layers, trying to just blend the two adjustment layer together to just bring back a little bit more of that two colors together, which will look a little bit better. So I'm doing it right now. And it's practically fixed, as you can see right now. So I went from something very, very dark to something way more saturated, but still with the same feel. Like we still feel like it's dark. What I could do now is just add a top mask on everything. And then maybe I could paint on that top mask to just bring back that darkness on the side. So like the background in the far away looks very dark, a little bit more desaturated, but the character here looks better. Maybe the only thing I would like to fix here just quickly is just the saturation of those legs. Now maybe there's something stocks, right? I think it's called stocks on the legs. Stockings, yeah, right. Maybe there's stockings, and that's the reason why it's darker. But I'm gonna assume it's not for this exercise. I'm just gonna take the levels and then just bring them more up. I'm just looking at the legs here, not looking at anything else. Then I'll just paint. Trying to bring back a little bit more of that. And I could also try with a color balance to just try to, I'll make sure to put the same mask on it so I can only see the things on the mask. And I'll try to just bring the same kind of color tone that the face has. And I might just take out a little bit of the darkness, trying to get that closer and closer to what it is. Bring with the shadows. I guess something like that is already a little bit closer. So we went from there to there. And in a nutshell, that's what it was, just to fix those colors. Now I'm seeing a little bit more of the details in the hair already here. And that's great because also, like, I could even like pump a little bit the whole image just as a whole a little bit more. And I'm going to explain why here. The reason is simple. If you were to print this, print is not a screen. The screen has light coming out of it. So it's easier to see the details and all the lights and the contrast and everything. When it comes to print, it's going to be on a paper. The paper does not reflect light. So to have more light in the dark places, we'll just make sure that those details that Tyron took the time to paint will show up. And that's very, very important, I think. So yeah, so that was what I had to show you today, guys. You can see now the before and after from very, very dark to a lot more saturated, but still with the same look and feel. And so, yeah, I hope that was helpful from there. If you have any questions on this technique, I can show you more. Or if you have any other questions about anything else, go ahead and shoot. I'm all yours.
Cool. Yeah, it's some really, really good techniques there. Really fantastic painting from Tyrone.
Yeah,
big guys going to come along. So yeah, I hope you guys find that useful. We had a question from Dennis from earlier, who's asking, where do we draw the line of how dark or how light we should have, like our illustration should be, in order to transition from grayscale to color?
Okay, I'll go back to that grayscale image here with the transformation I did. So as a rule of thumb, really from a grayscale image, what you want to make sure is that your dark, your shadows are not black, and your highlights or not even white, because it's really something you want to do once you're in colors. See, the difference between starting with colored image versus black and white is that your values, no matter what, will be changed a little bit while coloring it. Now, the reason why in a class like Illustration for Imagination, I make my students start in black and white, it's because it's just easier to just concentrate on one thing at a time. In this case, rendering in black and white is much easier than rendering in colors. So I don't have to explain all the different particularity of the color. But in a perfect world, you would already know values and how to render when you start colors. And you would not have that much of a problem then. So when you start in color, when you start in black and white, the rule of thumb is make sure that you don't have any black and any whites. You want to add those once you have colored image. Like in this case, if I were to do that, that effect that I already put here, I would probably like have something even darker on the both of them. And so when I'm going to start to put colors, I won't have any white. Like this is not supposed to be white. If it's white, then I would have to take it even less. Obviously, this is an image that it was already over, the value were already like burned a little bit. So it's hard for me to have like a rounded value, but it's also a great indicator that you need to adjust your rendering. Like in this case, the dress looks good, but the faces look flat. You see how this all in one value here. So you would have to just adjust that by rethinking where's your light direction, and then just adding the right highlights at the right places. It's missing just a few highlights that you would have to just bring to round up those shapes. Like the forehead here, that whole patch looks a little bit flat. So you would have to rethink, all right, so is there a highlight coming from the top of the head and going down? And just round it up. It's to really think the time of not having a white, but also not having abrupt change in the values. They need to be transgression from the light direction. Sometimes the smallest, like, I don't know if you guys see properly on screen here, but that's a very small change that I put, and yet it makes the difference between having a flat forehead and a rounded one. And then you can just take that same value you've been using here and then think about, all right, so there's probably a little bit on the nose. There's probably just a little bit here. Just rethink the whole thing. Like even that cheek here, maybe there's a little bit coming here, so it's going to make that go out. And same thing here, maybe, or maybe it's here. Like the light and the zones that you're putting, like maybe even here, will indicate how 3D the shape is and how it goes into space. So you have to think if the surface is the most perpendicular, right? If it's facing the light, that's where it's going to be the brightest. So if I'm having a flat value, it feels like it's facing that light, which in this case it's not, right? The light is from the top. So, and then you can even just boost that shadow here a little bit. And now everything starts to round up just slightly and a little bit more. Now, you would do the same thing in colors if you were to, but when you're in black and white, that's what you want to concentrate. You want to make sure that you're rounding up everything, but by staying in a range between, I don't know, from here I'm what? I'm 30. I'm guessing you can go up to like 15. Let me put 15% as white. So that would be like the highest value you would have. Maybe I would go even like 20 to be able to do this. So see, that's 20. And then in the darkest, it's the same thing. You don't want to probably go above 80, which 80 is this. So anything darker, like this is black. You won't see anything in this. This is 96. And if you go like, if I were to take all of this, all of this, now you can see the problem more clearly that I explained you that. You see that's close to white, that's close to dark if it's not close to black. And that's a problem here. Those things are looking a little bit too flat. So it's just missing that little bit of roundness. So you want to bring back those values to a gray zone. And then you want to continue painting on them with the right value to just push them hopefully that's answering your question.
So I guess one thing to keep in mind there is when you're painting in grayscale with the goal of converting it to color, I guess that's a different, like you have to keep that in mind versus if you were to just paint a black and white image. Like if that is the end goal for it to be black and white, then you'd probably want to push the contrast much higher, I guess, because like Tyrone's original piece in black and white looks very cool as a black and white piece because it does have that high punchy contrast. But then that's, I guess, what makes it harder to color without the colors getting too dark and muddy.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it's being in control. Just knowing the difference between what's going to happen is the key. Like I said, if this was the end goal of Tyrone, this is a nice illustration. You know, there's still a few places like the forehead here and the side of the face that are a little bit flat because there's only one patch with one value, so it could have needed just a little bit more roundness. But at the end of the day, this is looking very, very nice. I like the contrast of it, and there are lots of art out there that are high contrast. So it's not that it's a problem. It's knowing that, all right, if I'm about to change that to color, how are those colors are going to be able to attach to this illustration now that it's only white and black, basically. It's going to be harder because you won't see as much pigmentation of the color you're choosing on white or on black. Now, the one thing that's going to show a lot more if I'm putting like colors in here is the background almost. And also the value will change like drastically depending on what you're doing. It's hard sometimes to keep the same value. Let me show you a quick example here. If I were to just copy this image here, and I'm going to show you here. I'm going to just put one flat color on the whole thing. I'm going to put red, put that to multiply. And I'm going to change to black and white. You see how the values are changing? You need to adjust that and be aware that that change is going to happen. And that's the problem by doing an illustration from black and white to colors. That problem will occur. When if you're doing from color from the start, you'll have the control over your values. Values will change from black and white to colors drastically. It's about to know that it's going to happen. So to be on the safe side, basically when you start with a grayscale image, do with more gradient of grays and keep the black and the white for the color period of your illustration. This way you won't have that problem. Now, if I were to bring back those values here, I would have to desaturate it a lot, but even that would be different. Like, see, I'm going back to 0 before I see really the difference. So that's the problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we had a question from Moon, who was asking, what should I study to pick up good colors? I don't know how to study color. Do you have any advice on, just how to practice and study color, I guess?
Yeah, well, the one thing that's important to understand about color, I think, is how to play with the color scheme. So talking about like complementary color scheme, for like in this case, this is a complementary color scheme. So we have some greens, and then we have some orange, red in front of each other. So that's a color scheme that is very popular and really easy to work with. Then from there, it's all about those small changes, how to be able to bring the analogous color scheme within that color scheme, how to play with the grays as well. Lots of people think about coloring as being like, I'm going to take that green right here and mix it with his complementary right there, and that's going to be like harmonious. Well, those two colors, we know that they go well together, but those are really flashy and like contrasty. It's all about knowing the nuances and the values. One thing that I learned is that the best way to bring those two together is to mix them with some gray. When you mix them with some gray, it's a natural liaison that's going to happen in between the conversion. And instead of using a lot of red in an illustration and then a lot of green, what you want to do is choose one dominant color, maybe the red, and then you want to use just those grays that are closer to your complementary color. And by using those, you can even mix some black in it. And then by mixing those, that's going to give you a more pleasing image to put in front of you than having a high contrast and value and saturation in this case. Because contrast goes from value and also to saturation, right? And then there's a lot more to that. There's also edges that can be done, but that's beside the subject. But when it comes to saturation, this is a very good way to have some high contrast, to know the contrast of them. So if I were to just have an illustration that's like analogous, complementary, like this one here, this is like, even that's looking as orange now, but in fact, that's just me that been like mixing some green with that red. And now it's getting to get closer. Like, you know what happened? If you look at my color wheel here, what's happening is I start here with the red, and then I want to go to the green. And the easiest way for me to go through that is to go towards those colors. And those colors, I'm going to reach them if I mix them with a gray base. And that's what's happening, basically, in a nutshell. Yeah, that's what I had to do about that. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I got lost in my explanation.
I was going to say, yeah, that's definitely really good advice. I guess Moon was asking like how you personally, just how you practice and study color, if I understood.
Well, as a good practice is not going to sound boring, but practicing is all about studies. Just take images either from artists that you like or photography that you find the colors interesting, and then practice them. It's something to be able to see an image that you like, and then knowing, okay, those are the colors that I want to use. And it's another thing to try to match that as a study, because you're going to start seeing things while doing that study that you would not be able to just see by looking at it. Stuff like how to fix that shadow and have the precise amount of blue in it, for example. That's something that you're like, oh yeah, that shadow is blue. But then it's like, all right, how much blue? How much am I supposed to press on that? And how much am I supposed to mix it? And those efforts that you're going to put while doing your studies, that's where your brain's starting to make links. And that you understand from there, not only the theory, because the theory you probably already know it, but also the how to do it, which therefore is going to just help you get better and faster while doing your own work. So yeah, I would say that just find illustration that you're like, wow, I really like that color scheme, and try to do a small thumbnail. It doesn't have to be like very big, just a small thumbnail, and try to make sure that the colors are rearranged together in a pleasing way. That would be my answer to that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for studies, both photo studies as well as studies of other people's art. I mean, that's a pretty old technique, right? Just obviously it's not to create portfolio pieces or anything, but just for your own studies, for your own learning. Just trying to understand how other artists have mixed colors, how they have done things. That's a great place to start. All right, another question from Moon. How can we find the right local value for each part of our illustration, especially on skin?
Local value is all about lighting. So you need to, first of all, know, and that's also great to tag along with studies, like having a skin tone on like this skin tone, for example. All right, so we have that skin tone. So the lighting that I see is blue, green, and the skin tone definitely showing that. If my light, here, let me show you a quick example. If my light in the background was a different color, right, I'm going to change color. I'm going to put it to some red. Now she would look sick. And the reason would be because she's not supposed to have a local value with that color of greenish, because the red is light. So it means that she's even greener than that if it shows green as well. So there will be always like a base of that colored that's going to be mixed within the skin. So a great way to do this, see that would be already closer, right? It's too dark. I would have to fix that. But now the color itself makes more sense. It's more harmonious. So the trick that I do for this, for me as an artist, is this. If I have this local, I'm gonna take that brush, that local color skin, and I know that my light is this, then I'm gonna take that light, just put a bit on it, then take that, and then just try to mix them together, and that's gonna become my local colored. If the light was different, going back with the same, if the light is blue, like this one, then you just mix it a little bit again. And that's going to give you the base for your color. It's all about knowing the light and the color of the light that's in your scene. There's bounce lights also that this, but really the key to start with something that you'll be safe is to first know, all right, is it an outside scene? Is there a sun in it? Is it a sky? Is it a blue sky, or is it a gray sky with clouds? Those things will change drastically the color of your thing. You just need from there to choose what is going to be the color of the skin or the thing that you want to paint. And if you're like, all right, so that's going to be my base skin, and I got a blue sky, it's that blue, I'm guessing that blue sky usually it should be just a little bit more bluish, so maybe this, then you can just mix them together and then take that new color, and that will be the base of that color. Maybe a little bit less than that, but something, in between. And that's going to be it. But then if there's some sunshine that bounce on a side of this, then the color will change on the sunshine part, as we already learned with in the light, in the color light of the section of the illustration from imagination. So that's how you know. You first decide what's going to be the color of your skin, and then you just mix the color that's within. There's more to it, to be honest. That's the trick that I've been using too, because there's also lights that will be absorb a lot more, bounce a lot more, like different colors of lights. But in a nutshell, as a rule of thumb, this is working perfectly.
Cool. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. Tyrone was just chipping in the chat saying, I meant for the skin in this case to have a greenish tint to it, similar to compositions from The Matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. And it absolutely works on this illustration. I mean, because the color scheme works, like the greenish lights in the background works. There's a little bit of difference between the hands and the legs. That's my only comment about this. Like the ends are just a tiny bit warmer than the face, and the legs as the same thing. And definitely like the contrast is a lot more. But then I give it a pass on this one because the face is really what we should look at, not the hands. But it could have just a little bit more of a highlight, maybe on the knuckles, just to kind of tie them together a little bit more. But beside that, I think the values and the colors, not the values, the colors are definitely working here.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely also suggest bringing the just the skin tones on her hands just a bit brighter also, and just matching the face a bit more. I understand obviously you want the face to be the the immediate focal point, which is working really well. Maybe brightening the hands a little would then make those the clearer second focal point, along with the heads they're holding.
Yeah, well, the head's already like pretty bright, but yeah, just doing this,
yeah, for sure,
could be good.
We had a question from Maddie, who is asking, is it okay to take textures from someone else's artwork for photo bashing?
Yeah, I saw this on the Facebook, and I'm glad that you're asking it. Here's my thought on it. If it looks, once you use it on your illustration, if it looks like you took it from that artist, then no. If you take it to a point and transform it to a point that it becomes something completely new and nobody will ever know, then why not? At the end of the day, it's like doing some photo collages. Photo collages is an art by itself, and I can tell you that no one that does it use their photos. They're always using photos of other artists that they took somewhere else. And most of them, you can, like, if you knew that artist, you could definitely recognize that photo. It's just they're using usually vintage photos that have like 50 years ago, so nobody remember them. So if you're using a contemporary artist that lots of people know today, and then you use it to your illustration, and then you don't modify it enough, you will look a little bit foolish. So be careful with this. But at the end of the day, it's creation. You can take whatever you want as long as you create something out of it. If you're just using let's say a texture of a dress, and then you wrap it up on your dress because you don't want to render it, that's just copying and stealing the work of someone else. But if you're taking, I don't know, a piece of sky from an artist, and then you take that texture and you mix it in the clothing that you're doing, and then you add your lighting out of it, and it becomes that new thing. Why not? I mean, it's free to you to just let your imagination go wild. I'm just saying, be careful with this. It's one thing to use a picture, a stock image, maybe to just use a texture and put it on top of something and then create something new. And it's something else to take the work from another artist. It's a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, that's put really well. I guess there's never going to be like a clear cut yes or no to something like that. It really just depends, like David said. But yeah, definitely be careful when doing it with artists. Question from Pleo, who's asking, if I wanted to paint a desaturated illustration, do you have ways for to make it pop when, I guess, when everything is meant to stay desaturated?
Well, yeah, Pleo, you were using in the chat that you like to do desaturated, which is not a problem. That's why here I'm gonna give you an example with what I created here. So this is very saturated now. There's some parts are desaturated, like this is desaturated, this is desaturated, this is way more desaturated than this. But they're both like in the between. And I saw your illustration, and desaturated can be a style of yours. You can absolutely do it. I personally feel like certain parts should be a little bit more saturated to attract the eye and just bring more life to it. Otherwise, everything looks, to my own personal choice, dead. And I personally, to my personal own choice again, don't really like it. But then again, there's artists that do like pastel colors and they're doing great artwork, but at the end of the day, you cannot please everybody. So do something that you find is nice. At the end of the day, I'm teaching the way I feel I would do those things and how I would paint them. And I give my personal opinion and my professional, tips on it. And you can take what fits best for you. When I was looking at your artwork, for me, it was missing just that a little bit more of saturation to just bring a little bit more life to illustration. At the end of the day, it is absolutely up to you to know the feeling you want people to have when they're looking at it. To give this as an example, what I would have done with your illustration, and this is not your illustration, obviously, but it's just like I would boost it a little bit, and then maybe you can go back to desaturate, most of it, and then just have one place like this head, for example, as a focal point, as a direction for the eyes of the people to look at. That's just use it as a tool, basically. If everything is desaturated, it's harder for people to just know where to look at. So use it as a tool if you want to have more desaturated things, paintings. But at the end of the day, the call is absolutely yours. I'm just there to advise you, but you are the artist.
For sure. I think one thing also when working with a desaturated style, be careful with making it or it's harder to do, I guess, darker. Like I think that what David said about like pastel colors is a really good example of something that's desaturated. They're desaturated colors, but they're still fairly like bright and vibrant. As opposed to, I think it can start looking very gray very quickly if you're working too dark with desaturated styles. So maybe, just looking up artists that that paint with more of like pastel-y style colors would be a good place to start studying that.
I mean, there's a difference. Like, I want to give you an example now that you said that. It's good. It's a good call. There's a difference between desaturated and like sort of saturated, like desaturated. Like if you think this part here, or even like the heads would be a good example. Like this head is absolutely desaturated. It's absolutely gray. There's a little bit of a color in it, a little bit of red, but that's fairly desaturated. Like it could be the same desaturated can look like if you were to just change the color. See, like that's a little bit more saturated. I could put like a bluish color to fit more the scene, actually, So there's colors into that desaturation now compared to the gray that we had. And sometimes just bringing, you know what, I'm gonna do it on a few parts here. Sometimes when you do this on your painting, it just also bring the colors together. You see, like it's bringing them just closer to what the background is, and then it just, well, that's the wrong hand. It just harmonizes a little bit the stuff. So instead of having grays, you got like a color basically. But that illustration is already really, really dark, so it's not bringing that poppy, fresh colors as well because everything is already dark. Any more questions?
I just wanted to add to that, one artist whose work I personally love, who does very like desaturated pastel colors, but still has nice kind of poppy illustrations, is Janice Sung. Janice and then S-U-N-G. And I know there's a few like her also that could be interesting for you to study. I guess one thing is that I notice with their artwork is there's less gradients to it a lot of the time. They're like just the range of values isn't as high there, and I guess that kind of ties into what Dave was saying before then too. That kind of makes it avoids it getting too gray then. Questions, let me have a look. I don't think there were any other questions. Just take a quick look if any new ones came in. One last question from Mikal, but I guess this could be a fairly large one, so I'll see how you answer it. But could you give some advice on how to paint in color right from the start?
Yes, I can. I actually want to create a class in the near future that will be probably either an extension of illustration or a totally new class, because it's a big subject. I can give you some tips, but basically there's a lot to know about how to do the same thing you would do with a black and white image, but from colors. What I mean by that is thinking about values. Now, everything that you learn in illustration from imagination is super relevant from there. So you already basically know the base on how to do this. To give you an example, if I were to just redo this face here, when he did it in the black and white, he just rendered everything. But if I were to just take the base color, so I would have, just gonna have that here, the base color. So that would be my base color. And then same thing would appear with the analogous color. So I need to have like a darker color. I would not go with dark. That's gonna just bring desaturated. So what I would do is I would take that color, I would move them towards the reds, get a little bit more saturated, and that new color would be my basic shadow. That's how you would approach it. You would just make sure that you always have no black hues and saturated colors. Now, if you want to go even darker than that, I can even go more to the reds, a little bit darker, but stay saturated. The key to me when you start with color is to keep your colors very saturated and making sure that you have the right values. You see, like I'm pretty much having the same value when I put it in black and white here, but I'm using no black whatsoever. Black would be the last thing you want to put. Black would be like on this example, would be probably like, I'm gonna just do a quick example, would be probably the small bits that I would put in the nostril to just indicate like the deep shadow of it. And that was it. That would be the black that I would put in that. So that's how you do the same thing you've been doing through illustration from imagination, but you're doing it with colors. You basically want to start with your base color for each part. So that's the face, but then maybe the jacket here obviously would not start with white. If you start with white, you got no value again. You would probably start with, you know, a desaturated white gray, you know, like something like that. And then same thing, you would boost the color a little bit, maybe towards the bluish to get the highlights of the color that you have. And that would be like your highlights. And then in your shadows, maybe you would go with some purple, still saturated, to get your purple, right? So it's all about choosing the colors that you want to have, and that's all about depending on the light of the colors of your illustration. So really, you really know everything that you need to have to start with colors at this point. You just have to be careful of the values that you have when you place them. Like in this case, this example has not enough contrast because my values were not correct when I chose my shadow. That shadow should have been a lot more dark, and if that's too saturated, probably like even more desaturated. So it requires a little bit more practice for sure, but really it's all about knowing the color again of your light source from your secondary, from your direct light, all those things, and then it's just figuring out the colors that will go through it without ever using the black or the white until the very end, when you're going to put your highlights, your pure specular highlights, and your deepest shadows, such as occlusion shadows. And hopefully that's answering. There's a very cool tutorial in the Academy that I created that's called How to Fix Muddy Color, where I explain a little bit more, I think, that concept. But definitely that's a subject that I would like to create a more in-depth class where we would have kind of the same scenario that we did with Illustration for Imagination, where we have full-on projects that we built from scratch, but this time we would start with like color first.
Sounds exciting. Yeah, I think that's, I mean, because you also yourself rarely start in black and white these days.
Exactly. I did learn in black and white because I truly think that you need to, baby steps. I'm all worried about steps. So you need to start with understanding the value. But then, yeah, then it's a little bit of a waste of time to do it in black and white. Once you understand how to use them, you can start directly in color. And then as long as you understand the value, you'll be fine.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, it's all about not getting too overwhelmed at first also, isn't it?
Yes. Well, momentum
like
is a big thing when you were learning anything. So
for sure, for sure. Great. I hope you guys found that useful. Don't see any other questions in there, and that we have hit time now. Just want to say you guys are doing an incredible job. All the artwork I see being posted every day. I know the coloring stage is it's going to get, it's definitely one of the hardest steps of it all, but we're consistently impressed. Don't sweat it if you're a little behind on it still. If you're finding it difficult, just keep practicing. There's some more cool stuff coming out next week that'll help you guys push it even further. Yeah, any kind of last words from you, David?
That was pretty much it, guys. Thank you for showing up, guys. Like Fabien says, lovely work from you all. And yeah, we'll go back. We'll come back at you with some more material next week. We're approaching the end of this class. So, just stay with us, stay strong, keep on painting, and keep on posting. And thank you all for being there today.
And as always, happy painting. Have a fantastic rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you guys in the community.
Ciao, ciao.
All right. Take care, everyone.